Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 2nd Board of Education meeting. We are going to start off with some updates. I believe we have a Waverly update. Is it red? Oh. It's good? Here. Lori. Okay, here's mine. Okay.
Okay, this is
There
better.
we go.
There we go.
A few meetings ago, we approved plans to make a baseball and softball field at Waverly. This was mostly funded and planned by the Eastchester Little League, and now the field is open not only for the Eastchester Little League's players to enjoy, but also our Waverly students. Next Thursday, May 11th at 4:30, we'll be holding an official ribbon cutting ceremony, followed by a game for our kindergarten and first graders. Please join us for this wonderful celebration of improving our facilities for our students and our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Yes, Dr. Valenti and I will be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope all board members, hope everyone can come. Any other updates?
I'll just say one.
Sure.
Just want to give everyone one final reminder to come join the Greenvale PTA for the Parents' Night Out this Thursday, May 4th at Wicked Wolf. You can buy tickets ahead of time or you can buy tickets at the door. It should be a fun night, so hope to see everybody there.
Thank you, Jackie. Anyone else? No. Okay. We are up to superintendent's report. Yep.
Okay. Very good. I'll go to my usual podium spot. How's that? Good evening, members of the board. We're on, right? Yep. And members of the community. We do have a very full report tonight, so I'll get right to it. Is Natalie Malone here? Natalie, hi. Come on up here, Natalie. Natalie is a well-revered, respected teacher, grade 2 teacher at Greenvale School. Natalie has been with us since 2003. She has 20 years of experience as an educator, highly regarded by her administration, faculty, and parents. And she's doing research on the impact of online educational marketplace on teacher professional identity and learning design. And she's doing her work at St. John's University. So first of all, we're very proud, Natalie, that you're doing this work as a teacher and a researcher and contributing to the field of scholarship. And so I wanted to invite Natalie to speak to the board, the community, say a few words about the work that she's doing and the survey research I'd like to conduct with some of our faculty. So, Natalie?
Good evening, and thank you for your time. It's been my privilege to be a teacher at Greenvale for 20 years. I just love my work so much, and I started doing my PhD studies quite a few years ago now, before COVID, and it's been quite a journey because I was looking for new ways to learn about my profession and to grow as a professional. So my study is considering how the teacher identity evolves over the course of a career. Increasingly complex, diverse, and inclusive classrooms required the direction of highly skilled teachers who are committed to continual growth as professionals. Many research studies in the past have studied professional identity, but they're generally focused on how professional identity emerges among new teachers who are just completing their college education. Very few long-term studies are in existence. Understanding but it's really, the few studies that are in existence do show some interesting trends in what helps teachers to sustain their motivation throughout the course of the career. And I believe it's important to understand the influences and characteristics that shape professional identity throughout the career, because I believe it can yield important insights into why some teachers continue to thrive and grow while others stagnate. My research is particularly focusing on the role of the impact of the online educational marketplace, which includes things like Teacher Pay Teacher, and how that has impacted the way that teachers have conducted their work throughout the course of their career in terms of lesson design. What I intend to do is to conduct a qualitative multiple case study where I intend to invite 5 veteran elementary teachers to participate in a cycle of 3 interviews. The first interview, we kind of go over the background of their career. The second interview, we look at samples of lessons that derive from the online educational marketplace. And the third part is more of a reflection on the process. I will be analyzing the interviews as well as the artifacts brought to the interviews to understand the qualities that kind of make an effective lesson, and the things that are perhaps lacking in some of the materials that are downloaded. And in addition, that will be to conclude the study, I intend to conduct a focus group where I share my analysis with the participants as a form of member checking to ensure accuracy and participant validation of the conclusions that I'm drawing. So, thank you.
Stay here. And Natalie is asking that the board be aware of her work and that approve the approach that she'll be taking. You'll be protecting anonymity and confidentiality, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And following the protocols of the IRB process. So she's doing everything according to the requirements of sound doctoral research. So if any of us hear about surveys that Natalie is conducting or other kind of work, we know now that she's doing work here, and it's very productive work, and we appreciate. And do come back when they honor you with the doctorate, okay? Promise that.
I will. Thank you.
Okay. Let's give her a round of applause. Huh?
Thank you.
And we do have a new doctor in the house. Have I mentioned that? That Dr. Chester, Susan Chester, completed her work at Manhattanville. We haven't given you a round of applause. Oh, okay, good. So moving right along, I want to talk about a very different topic, but one that we must address, summer asbestos. I did raise this issue a couple of meetings ago. We did meet with the architect, our construction folk, our assistant superintendent for finance facilities, director of facilities. Peter, as well as Elliot Sheldon, was there. We had all of our principals there. And this is the latest information that we have. Greg was there, Scott, etc. So everyone was in the same room hearing the same information. At the high school, the abatement period will go from June 26th to July 31st. Now, the abatement period means those funny-looking people in spacesuits walking around, that's when they will be in the building getting the asbestos out of the walls, the roofs, the ceilings, whatever, wherever it exists. The rebuild period is whatever they break down during that abatement period, they have to build up again. So technically, the abatement period at the high school ends July 31st, middle school, July 26th, and Ann Hutch, July 7th, Greenvale, July 3rd, and Waverly is the shortest period, June 29th. But then there is a rebuild period that we also have to consider. So knowing now what the extent of the work is and the depth of the work, I wanted to talk about what impact this will have on the use of our buildings during the summer. I would recommend that all of our schools be out of bounds during the abatement period that I just shared with you for each of those schools, without written approval from the architect, the contractors, and the superintendent. That is to say, if there is a specific request to use a portion of the building. For example, there is a request from the athletic department, can we take advantage of our area for weight training and so forth. If that is something that is within the architect contractor's sense that you're within a safe distance, and I'll take a look at it with them and with the athletic director and the high school principal, then we'll come to a conclusion that that could be an exception. But I would like to think that use of the buildings during the abatement period would be by exception only, not just simply as a matter of fact. Ideally, we do not want students, parents, and staff, I've discussed this with the units, in those areas during the abatement period unless there is specific approval, as I say, from the architect, contractors, and then I would give the final sign off on it and inform the Board of Education. But I think we have to take this very seriously and be sure that the health, safety, and welfare is our primary concern of all parties. Now, that does have a larger impact on our use of rooms during the summer. We did say to the town, and rightly so, that we would share rooms with the town for their town camp. So that's going to put an additional stress and burden on available space. So we've decided that Ann Hutch would be for district use of programs, Greenvale for the town use for the camp, and that Waverly would be distributed between the two parties, the district and the town, for the use of facilities. That said, the extended school year program, which normally runs 30 days, may, and I want to emphasize may, have to be curtailed to 25 days because of the extent of the abatement period. But hopefully we can get the 30 days in, either in actual days or in terms of hours, because that is a program for our special needs pupils, and under the law, we're obligated to meet for a certain number of days. We also want to continue our Regents preparation algebra R classes, and that is only a half-day program. Now, we were entertaining a K-8 program for academic intervention, and either Scott or Greg can talk to this if there are questions, but that would put an additional demand on classrooms, plus air-conditioned classrooms, because it can get awful hot during the summer, and securing sufficient energy and electricity to rooms that do not have air conditioners can become an additional expense, which we had not budgeted. So we think it's prudent to scale back the summer program to the ESY, the Regents Prep, and Algebra R classes, and hold off till the following summer when all of this work will have been completed and we'll have access to all the available classrooms. So at this point, I want to stop, and Scott or Greg, did you want to add anything to this? And you haven't heard back from the state yet, Greg? On the 30 days versus the 25?
We have expressed to New York State Education Department the issue we have with the time frame being really shortened. I gave them all the information about our abatement periods and the parameters around that we don't think we can get that many days in. They're taking it in up the line to the supervisors. I have not heard official word back yet. So once I do, I'll make sure to alert Dr. Valenti. And if it is going to be shortened in any way, shape, or form, we will certainly let our community know. If not, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to get it done. And either way, we'll get it done.
Mm-hmm. And this program is funded by the state, right? In part, at least.
We get approximately 80% of the cost back for students that are in a 12-month program. We
Right.
expend the money first, and we get, on the revenue side, we get about 80% back.
Yeah. Okay. So, are there any board questions at this point, or I'll proceed to the next item? Judah?
Just, do we have a contingency plan if the rebuild impacts availability of classrooms?
Well, by that, do you mean if it goes into September?
In other words, you have Waverly was June 26th, 29th. Each school had an abatement period and then had
Right,
a rebuild period.
correct.
But the rebuild period, depending on the outcome of the abatement process, could close.
Could be extended. Is that your question?
Yeah, would it cause interruption?
Right. Well, the short answer is yes, we'll not be able to use those rooms. Although the architect did say, and the construction folk, that during the rebuild period, there is no danger health, safety, and welfare with respect to abatement. That is solely construction. Now, to what degree would that interfere with use of classrooms during that period? The advice we have so far is that it would be minimum.
Okay.
And if you notice, they're extending it to August 31st. So they're giving themselves the time. Let me go back. Yeah, let's look at that again. Lee, why don't you make a comment? Go ahead.
Especially in the elementary, is this on? Especially in the elementary schools, the rebuild is specifically for the new vestibules that will be in the front of the buildings, so that will not really impact the classrooms as much. In the middle school and high school, the rebuild will be throughout the building, and we're not planning to use the classrooms in those areas.
I recall when we did the middle school construction, I think it was, there was work going on in the room like next to the cafeteria, and it was like, oh, it won't be a big deal, but classrooms and eating were disrupted. So I was trying to make sure that we had some consideration of that. It sounds like people are already on board with that, so that's good.
Okay, are there any other, Vito?
Yeah, if I understand that correctly, that 5-day issue with the summer school is that we won't have classrooms and how many classrooms are we talking about for that program? Is that like 5 classrooms? Is it?
So by law,
The red light has to be on.
by law, we have to have a 30-day program. That's in the regulations,
Right, that I know,
right?
but-
So we have approximately, we're going to need 20 spaces. We have approximately 4 or 5 elementary classrooms and 4 secondary classrooms that we run. Plus, we run reading over the summer, which is a mandated ESY service for some of our kiddos. There's OT and PT space. So we'll figure it out either way. I want to make sure our community knows that if we're granted the 25 days, the issue is with the abatement period, and the abatement and Hutch are on the entranceways that we can use to get kids in and out. So if they're with abatement, we can't get in at the front is off limits, period, for the whole summer pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But where the parents drop off at Ann Hutch, that is where our entry, arrival, and dismissal is going to be. But they're not going to be, as you see, I think it's the 7th, they're not going to be done with decontamination until the 7th. We usually start on the 1st of July. We backed it up knowing this project we wanted to start on the 5th of July. But at a recent meeting, we realized the date is not going to meet our date of July 5th, so the 7th. So that's why we're asking the state,
Right.
in the event that we can't find 5 other days on the front end somewhere else, or 5 days on the end, can we get an exception? And that's what we're waiting for.
My question really was, if they don't give us that exception, we obviously have to come up with some kind of a solution. And
Correct.
my question would be, is it something where we can call, and I don't know if this is legal or doable, but call Tuckahoe and maybe rent the classrooms from them for a week? They're in our town, and you could ask for an exemption from the state to have it within our district, because it's literally a mile, less than a mile, but I'm just trying to think out of the box as what's a possible, the other thing is Immaculate Conception. I don't know if they use their school during the summer, but they are actually inside of our district. So if we had to rent some classrooms for a week
Yep.
like that, I mean, we might want to keep that
Yeah,
in mind.
there are a lot of options, those could be 2 good options that we'll look at. We have a couple contingencies. One is, one of the things is we got to give the building back to the custodians to turn it around for the school year. So on the tail end of that, extending it 5 days is an option, but we got to look to see if we could do it. So we could extend it 5 days on the other end of it. The challenge with that is by the time we got to get it back to the custodians and our staff, well, we have a staffing issue. Will staff be able to work that period? Because typically they don't work that late. So there are a few options. Those are good ones, Vito, we can explore. I want to see what the state says. I think we have plenty of time.
Obviously, if the state gives us the 25, we're
Yeah, I
cool.
mean, I think that's the safest way to move kids, especially this population,
I
from
know
one
that's
location
difficult.
of 5
It's a
days.
change of everything and.
Well, I mean, these are our most needy population,
understand.
and to change them, I don't know what educational good that would do. I would rather be a little bit more creative in district. Maybe if there's space at, as we said, Waverly may have a little bit of space. If we can move a couple programs, share some space there, we can be very creative and try to, we'll figure it out.
I know we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
I'm
we will.
just-
And Vito, just going back to Tuckahoe schools are used for Camp Rainbow. That's where Camp Rainbow, I think, has at the high school. So that kind of takes,
Yeah, I know that, but that could be, Camp Rainbow ends at some point, and this could be after, you know what I'm saying? It's just a consideration, just something to think about.
As
You
you
know.
explore it, Greg, like I know ICS, an example, they run a summer program there also, so not to get ahead of our skis, it sounds like you've got a good handle on it.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay. So everyone's aware that, this is happening, we're on top of it, and we'll keep you informed. Let me change the topic. There have been some recent budget inquiries, and I do want to address them briefly. There was a question raised about the 0% tax levy increase. Gee, that's a wonderful thing, but did that have an impact on class size or staffing? And the short answer is no. There's no relationship between the two. That we're looking at the most efficient and effective use of our personnel, whether we went to the cap or 0%. And I do want to look at our teacher-student ratios in a moment. The other question that was raised is, well, thank you for the 0%, but what does that mean for the out years, next year and the year beyond, et cetera? And the short answer, again, is that we did take a look into the future. We didn't operate solely within the confines of 1 year, but this was the year. If you didn't give the tax levy 0 this year, you weren't going to get that same opportunity in the future. Why this year? Why this year and not any other year? Because we got 3.6 million more in foundation aid. That was a bump. It brought us from about 12 to 16 million in state aid. This was a 1-year bounce, and so it was a 1-year opportunity to go with the 0. In building next year's budget and beyond, And when our new official comes on board, I'll spend some time either in the summer or at a September meeting to show you a 3-year and a 5-year plan. We are looking at revenue that will justify future year budgets as well. I know on a PTA call that Chrissy and I were on just before tonight's meeting, we did talk about going up to a 2% cap, which is within the law, and based on the current assessables, that in itself would generate in the neighborhood of about $1.6 million. Additionally, our debt is going to increase, and that would justify some additional state aid. And we're pretty comfortable with the appropriated surplus for this year of 1.57, and we think we're going to come close to meeting that as remaining monies by June 30th. And we also have a healthy unfunded, well, I should say a fund balance that is unallocated of $4 million. So without touching the big rainy day fund, we think we can manage the remainder of this year and going into next year in a solid way. So from a financial point of view, I don't want folks getting concerned about the zero. And from a longer range point of view, there are increases in next year's budget that are not going to continue in future years. They're baked into next year, but not the future. For example, go to the 1600 code and look at security. It more than doubles. That's because we're going with 2 additional SRO offices, even though one is being funded by the town. And we're increasing our security in general by extending hours at the schools. Once you bake that into a budget, it's there, so you don't increase it for a following year other than by any increases that are inflationary driven. We also have a substantial amount of money built into this budget for curriculum work that will not need to be done in a following year. So there are elements of next year's budget that by exception is not just a 0% tax levy increase, but also by exception has certain programs built into it as well. There are other areas, I don't need to go into all of them. Your transfer to capital is another good example. We have 1.7 million that we're putting in there, and we don't need to do that necessarily to that amount in future years, but we thought the playgrounds and the fields and a lot of the other things that were necessary, this again was the year to do it. So just those side words on the budget in general. On the issue of class size, a lot of this could be in the eye of the beholder. Many years ago, there was a major study in the state of Tennessee that was written up nationally, and the ideal class size was 1 teacher to 15 pupils. Now, anyone sitting around any table would say, wow, I'd love that. And some private schools do have that. But if you look at most public schools, we're not in that neighborhood, 1 to 15. We're pretty much in the neighborhood of low to mid-20s. So looking at Waverly for next year, our numbers, I think, look good, 1 to 22 and 1 to 20. Now, this is using the estimated enrollment that we had at the time. If there is a surge at Waverly over the summer, then we'll address it during the summer. Conversely, last summer, we had classes of 18 because we had 10 sections, and guess what? We only had 180 pupils, and we thought we were getting 220, which is pretty much the normal number. So we were looking at 1 to 22 with 10 sections, and Waverly wound up with 1 to 18 by exception because that was a demographic year that just fell outside the normal distribution curve. Looking at Ann Hutch and Greenvale for next year, at second grade, 1 to 22, so there's equity there. 1 to 21 in third grade. Now, Ann Hutch has a slight leg up on fourth grade to Greenvale, and conversely, Greenvale has a slight leg up on Ann Hutch. Okay? Now, a number of parents have written to me. I suspect they may have written to board members as well, and maybe many other people, asking for an additional section at Ann Hutch in grade 5 for next year. We currently have an estimated 98 pupils, and when you divide that by 4 sections, you get to about 1 to 24. And when you divide that by 5 sections, which is the request, you get to 1 to 18 and change. So we do have within the budget the capacity, if there is enrollment growth, to address it where it's appropriate. But right now, these numbers compare favorably with our neighboring districts and with the county in general, and are well within our contractual limits. So I did want to honestly confront the issue. I think we have to look at staffing very carefully, and if there is a compelling need to add a teacher because of enrollment, then that could be addressed at the appropriate time. So I don't want to say that it's an open and shut case. A budget is not a static document, it's a dynamic document. But if you take something, then you may have to lose something else. But we're ready to address the issues. But I wanted to be very public and transparent about the current TS ratios and what's in the budget. So I don't know if the board has any comments or questions about this at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Valente. I'll just say that just from the past, I mean, when my children were in the lower grades, I forget what year it was, but I think Greenvale was upwards. And there were times when Ann Hutch, too, this is going back several years, 27, 1 to 27, 1 to 28. And I can tell you the district was really good at that time about really analyzing and figuring out creative ways to even open up sections when it needed to be. So I just want to, for parents that are out there, we'll do our due diligence and do what's right for the children. But these numbers here, I think, are awesome. And they're doable, I mean, for teachers.
Right.
I'll just add to that, Christy, that I know one year my son in 5th grade class, there was 27 children in the class. So, you know, for parents who maybe don't realize, this is not even the highest that it has gone in the past. This seems to be within the average.
And I will be doing further research on a county level and bringing to the board at future meetings what are the numbers in neighboring districts and overall within Westchester, et cetera, so that we are on top of what class sizes are.
I think one of the things that may have driven the confusion here is because there are disparities between class sizes at different grade levels. As people see, oh, a teacher is being accessed at the 5th grade level or at the 4th grade level and added at a different level, it was some confusion about, does that mean they're moving teachers around to make room for things? And just as someone who's had kids with, one of my children was in the smallest grade level in the school district at the time, and the grade immediately preceding him was one of the biggest school, grade levels of the school at the time. So that happened to him every year. There was a movement of a teacher, to make numbers like this fit. And it can seem confusing when you think everything is just one big bag of, uniformity, and it's not. So hopefully that helps explain, if you have, like you said, 98 kids in one year, but the next year has 104, 5 teachers is a different meaning to each of those grade levels. It's important to realize that someone's going to move.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why it's more easy to equalize at Waverly, where you have all of your students at one grade level in the same school. but I don't want to pursue that,
Absolutely, absolutely. But
although I just did, but I won't.
You brought it up, but Doc, if I may add, every year we wrestle with how many kids are going to be entering Waverly, and we ask people, register early, register early, register early. And if we get 30 kids between now and September, we're going to add another section. We're
Of
not going to
course.
have, 3 more, we're not going to go to 25, 26 in Waverly because that's inappropriate.
Sure.
If you get another 10 kids in another grade level, you might not have to go up that teacher. So these numbers are as balanced as I've ever seen them as far as,
The
being with
equity of
the.
things, yeah.
I hate the word equity, but yeah.
Well, no, you don't.
The
You
equity,
like
the equity between the schools and the grade levels is fairly consistent, it's very consistent here. And I know that, I'd love to give you credit for it, but it's just the way the numbers worked out. It's how many kids are in each grade level in each school. So,
Okay.
good job.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Well, moving right along, we did want to remind everyone there is a board meeting in 2 weeks. By the way, this is the third Tuesday in a row that we're meeting, and I know we like this kind of a habit, but we're going to take a break on May 9th, and we'll meet again on the 16th, 7:30 p.m. But it also is a school budget trustee vote, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., and you have the proposition there on the budget, and I mentioned the voting hours. District Clerk, did you want to say anything about the meeting on the 16th? Are you good? All set to go? All set to go. Okay, so everybody is made aware. Let me talk about another subject that's caused a little bit of confusion. And we had a great meeting today with our faculty representative president and vice president and director of personnel to try and flesh out some questions that were raised by parents about specifically the spring parent-teacher conferences. They will occur on Friday, May 12th and Wednesday, May 17th. And I was very interested in having a meeting today so that all of us, teachers, administrators, board, parents, and community are on the same page as to what the script is that we'll be following. Certainly 12:30 to 3 p.m. On May 12th, that is the Friday, that will be time allocated to parent-teacher conferences. Our students will be dismissed 11:30. Our teachers have their lunch until 12:30, and then they begin meeting with parents, depending on the number of slots, in generally 15-minute intervals. And likewise on the 17th, you see about 15 extra minutes there, and that because it's not a Friday, it's a Wednesday, May 17th, and again, there are approximately 11 slots. Now, all parents receive interim reports during the spring. There's no debate about that. However, some parents are invited to conferences based on teachers' knowledge of a child. Okay? The question has come up from some parents, well, I've not been invited. Does that mean I can't have a conference? And the answer is, well, of course you can. If you're not invited, parents may contact the school or teacher directly to schedule a conference, okay? So this is a long-standing practice in the district. I don't want it misinterpreted in the negative. I'd like to look at it from a positive point of view. Everybody agrees the purpose of a parent-teacher conference is not only to commend what the child has done well, but to make recommendations where the child needs to improve, okay? So the fact that certain parents might be invited does not mean that other parents could not take advantage of the conference if they felt a need to. And certainly we encourage parents to meet with teachers as often as possible. Now, there is a time constraint. You only can get so many 15-minute conferences in a 2-day period. So we will live with that for this calendar year. Teachers are very generous with parents in terms of arranging alternate types of meetings by phone, by Zoom, by other instruments that they've used to communicate at different times of the day. So that takes a little bit of the burden off the actual 12th and 17th. So there is flexibility there as well. So I didn't want to leave this in an area where there were some emails generated by parents that were wondering what the district's practice or policy is. And I think this comes about as close as possible to trying to explain it in the most positive way one could. I don't know if the board has any questions on what the practice will be this spring. I also want to add, we have an elementary report card committee that is looking very carefully at our current report cards. We think there is room for improvement, and this could impact reporting periods as we stage that for next year in the future. Are there any questions from the board? So now we have the main event. Dr. Greg Stowell is going to talk to us about a multi-tiered support system and speak on behalf of our district committee. Dr. Stowell. I yield the microphone to you.
Thank you, sir. I hate that I'm the main event, so hopefully we won't disappoint. But I'm not going to be able to do this alone, so I'm going to ask the aforementioned Dr. Chester, Director of Humanities, to join me, esteemed member of the district-wide MTSS committee, if you will come up. Also, Kristen Kumar, Assistant Principal over at Ann Hutch, another member of our district-wide committee, and Dana Mosca, school psychologist at Waverly and Ann Hutch, another member. I'm going to do something I don't do often, which is try to speak less, be brisk, but try to be comprehensive at the same time. So the purpose of bringing this to the board is twofold. The district has been looking at MTSS, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is a multi-tiered systems of support, for many years. And we've been grappling with that. And this year we really took it as a charge to develop a district-wide committee and answer these guiding questions. What is MTSS and why is it necessary? Who makes up the district-wide committee and what is going to be their charge? Identify what interventions and structures and processes exist currently, and is it consistent vertically and horizontally across the district? We want to conduct a gap analysis and identify where are we proficient and where do we have room to improve. And last, we want to draft a formal plan, which I think we shared with the Board of Education, and present it tonight for consideration at a future board meeting for adoption. So, first, I'm not going to read all these names, I promise you, but we have 34 members of our district-wide committee that met 4 times throughout the year and did work as a building group in between our meetings. So there's 34 members. They represent administrators and teachers and related service providers and interventionists and central office administrators across the district. So I want to thank them publicly for their hard work and diligence, and we're really proud of the work that we have done. So what is MTSS? MTSS really is a system of intervention and support that looks at three main areas: academic, behavioral, social emotional, or the whole child, and we use data, student data on those elements to drive interventions in a systematic, tiered approach that's consistent across the district. So I'm gonna kick it over to my colleagues to talk about what is the attributes of a good MTSS system. Thank you, Kristen.
Of course.
All right, so one of the things we really looked at in the committee was thinking about MTSS from both the academic and the social emotional lens. So it was really important that we were well represented. So we looked at social emotional learning, behavior, and positive behavior interventions and supports, and really thinking about how we can get consistent across the buildings with our messaging and our interventions and our plans so that we can see our student success over time. So these are some ways that we looked at the social emotional side. And when we look at the academic, we look at our 3 tiers. Tier 1 being our universal core instruction. So we looked at what was happening day to day in our classrooms. What is our core instruction? How are we delivering that? And what are our classroom teachers doing to support students who maybe need some extra help or maybe need a push? So then we move up to our tier 2, which is our targeted group interventions. Those are generally taking place out of the classroom with our interventionists. We, again, made sure that we were looking at a really clear and systematic approach so that at Ann Hutch, we knew what was happening at Greenvale, and we had access to the same resources. We were using the same tools. Everything we were using was research-based, and we really got aligned. And then also thinking about our transition. So knowing what's happening at Waverly, so when we scoop up those second graders at Ann Hutch or Greenvale, we know exactly where they are. We have their data. We know what programs we've been in. We know what they were doing. And we don't have to go backwards and relearn everything about those students. And then likewise from our upper elementary into middle school and middle school to high school, and creating this plan that then aligns all of that and holds us to what we're saying is happening. It also allows us to look at those toolkits that we have and make sure that we have things that are not just happening in isolation. So when there's good work that's happening, we're sharing it across the district. And then we move into our tier 3, which is our really intensive and individualized interventions. This is a really critical step when we think about that really small group or one-to-one instruction for those students that we really need to set really specific goals for. We need to provide really targeted and clear instruction so that we can start to make progress back towards meeting their grade level goals. So same process, we looked at our programs, we looked at our interventions, and we looked at what do these students really need, and also what do we then need in terms of professional development for our teachers to make sure that we have the best programs to target the students that have those needs.
Yeah, and so to really illustrate what Kristen was just saying, here we have each of our elementary buildings, and we have a list of all of the different programs that we're using for either tier 1 instruction or for an intervention, and then the tier where that program is being used. And that allows us, at a glance to be able to see, the what, the where, and the how. So the what programs do we have access to that are already in our buildings, the where in terms of where is it being used by building and also by grade level. And that's important, as Kristen was saying, for that articulation between 2-3, between 5-6, and between 8 and 9. And then also the how. How are we using a program? At which tier? And sometimes you'll see that there's some overlap. So I'll give Hegarty, which is a new program for us this year, that's very, very well received by both faculty and students for phonemic awareness. We're using it in tier 1, every single student in grades K, 1, and 2, but we're also using it as a more targeted intervention, either by the classroom teacher in a small group or in a pull-out setting. And then we're talking about how do we look at a program like Hegarty that's really meant for the primary grades. What happens at grade 2? Does every student still need to be getting it every single day, or does it move into becoming an intervention from a tier 1? So having a chart like this just enables us to sort of see it all laid out together.
And then we have some photos for you just to see. We've got Waverly reading instruction in Tier 2. We have an elementary Tier 1. That's a teacher at Ann Hutch pulling a small group within the classroom. So that's still Tier 1 instruction, but targeted toward what those particular students need. And then secondary Tier 2 reading. So the middle photos are from the middle school, and then the one on the right is from the high school.
So during our MTSS committee meetings, I don't know if that's low enough, members clearly identified social, emotional, and behavioral programs and frameworks used to deliver services at each of the tiers. For example, all 3 elementary schools use PBIS, or Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, as part of our Tier 1 intervention. Each elementary school has a different acronym or motto to encourage students to be kind, safe, act responsibly, and respectfully. Schools have different ways to promote PBIS, such as daily morning meetings at Waverly and behavioral expectation posters displayed throughout Ann Hutchinson. At Tiers 2 and 3, more intensive support is offered, such as group or individual counseling and a check-in, check-out system. All elementary schools incorporate several programs, such as the Zones of Regulation, which is a program that teaches emotion identification and regulation. So as you can see in these pictures, we have a Tier 2 counseling group at Waverly. We have our morning meeting, which happens daily at Waverly. And then we have an example of one of our PBIS heart posters at Ann Hutch.
One of the other things that was really important to this group is really systematizing the work that we're doing. So this example here is what one of our forms might look like when we are meeting on a student at the building level. We collect all of this data in one centralized place with everyone using the same form, so that as students go throughout their career here, we have really strong data and we know what we've met on, we know what their goals are, we have their benchmark data, we know that families have been communicated with, and it's really a check system for us to make sure that we've done everything we need to do along the process. And that way, if we end up with a referral to special education, or if we end up in June and we still need more intervention, again, like I said earlier, we can pick up exactly where we are. We're never starting 2 steps back. So this form will be a way for us going forward to collect all of that information and have really strong systems in place.
So over the course of the meetings that we had this year, we were really proud to identify, some solid areas of proficiency, things that are already in place that we feel that we're doing well. So for grades K to 5, evidence-based core literacy instruction, and then again, that will continue next year with our new programs in literacy. And then for K to 5, RTI, or response to intervention, and academic interventions for literacy and numeracy at Tiers 2 and 3. At all of our elementary buildings, there are student data review meetings to see how students are responding to the interventions that are being given to them. We have at the middle school, we have Tier 1 push-in social emotional support lessons, or SEL lessons, that are provided by the counselor. And also at the middle school, clearly articulated reading and ELA and math support for Tiers 2 and 3. And then for the high school, we have learning workshops, which are offered to provide content and organizational assistance.
I believe we can celebrate a lot of good work, but I won't lie to you, we have a lot of work to do. This is a multi-year plan. I think Dr. Valenti said you're budget is a kind of flexible document. This MTSS plan is supposed to be flexible as well. So we did identify some areas that we do need to work on, and that'll be our charge next year. And my hope is that the committee can meet again next year and we can start to work on systematizing some of these things. So for all grades, I think we need to look at an SEL framework at the Tier 1 level that is embedded to every school, every child's classroom. That is currently happening at the Tier 1, but not in every single classroom with consistency across the district. And that was in the gap analysis I talked about earlier. We also want to create greater clarity around AIS support, which is academic intervention support, which is students that do not meet standard on state tests, versus intervention services through MTSS. They can be one and the same, and they can be different. And we talked a little bit earlier about standardizing how we communicate with documentation. We developed new documentation that'll be consistent K through 12. That's the first time we've had such a thing. But we need to continue to do a better job at adding more systems and supports that are consistent. So if I'm an interventionist at Waverly, I use the same process, the same forms that I do if I'm an interventionist at the high school. We also want to make sure that we increase for grades 6 through 12, really looking at evidence-based interventions, adding to some of it. We talked about some strength at the middle school, but at the high school, interventions at math and numeracy at Tiers 2 and Tier 3, I think we need to focus on as well. And in grades 6 through 12, I think we need to increase some of our Tier 2 interventions in SEL. We're working in this budget. As you know, we talked about our flexible support program. We think that's going to be a great Tier 3 major intervention for SEL. I think we need to look at what happens in between, what happens in the classroom, and what happens for students that need a program like that. 6 through 12, we need to really start to look at our PBIS system. You had an example of HEART at Ann Hutch. It's pretty clear. It's pretty consistent with the CASEL framework. And so I think we need to look at that again for grades 6 through 12. And lastly, I do think for the high school, it's not unique to Eastchester. We really do need to start to look at direct services both in the classroom at Tier 1 for kids that are struggling with not just content, but some basic skills too that are prohibiting them from gathering the content. And we need to look at our intervention systems at Tier 2 and Tier 3, particularly in the areas of reading and math, organization and study skills, particularly at the high school. I think that's an area we identified as we can do a better job. So, I don't know about brevity. I know Lori was timing me. I think I went over my 10.5 minutes she gave me before this meeting. But if you have any questions, we would love to answer them. If not, your main event is over for the evening.
Dr. Stoll, I was just curious, did you say at the onset, what's the roadmap in terms of the milestones for this whole program? Like, where do you see I'd love to see like a bar graph of kind of like where things are lining up, or where you anticipate that will be full-fledged, everything, will be put in place, huh?
Well, I think the plan that I shared with the board, which, if it's adopted, we'll share with the public, outlines kind of what we have in place right now. Okay. My plan, this is at least a 5 or 6 year plan, multiple budget years. Right. There's a lot to do in the areas of focus. So I think it's dynamic in how much can we push in a particular budget year? What's the data showing us about where we need to, focus in year 1 versus year 2, year 3? I think it's a more dynamic process, but I will tell you in general, having done this type of work before, this is a 3 to 5 year endeavor, and then it just gets iterative year after year and we make it better. And that's the beauty of doing this work, is constantly making it better and iterating year after year. But I think to be where we begin with the end in mind, as Covey said, I would tell you that we'd probably looking at 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, I was particularly happy, with regard to high school and the focus that's going to continue to kind of evolve there in terms of the types of services for the AIS and, teachers in the classroom, extra help in the classrooms, et cetera. So I guess, related to equity, right? You can't do it all at once, but I guess I'm hopeful in that you'll plan that equal amounts of effort are being placed across all of our schools in a reasonable fashion.
Absolutely, not to belabor the point, but we did a lot of focus this year, and a lot of the work we did with Haggerty was an example, right? First in Math you heard about. Right. All of this was to shore up our Tier 1 instruction, because a part of an MTSS plan, you start with good core instruction. And there's been a lot of focus on literacy, there's been a lot of focus with Reveal Math and other programs like First in Math. There's been a lot of focus on shoring up Tier 1, and then looking at what we do in Tier 2, and then saying what are we missing in Tiers 2 and Tier 3, or what are we missing in Tier 1, as we said with the SEL in every classroom. So I think it's a multi-year plan, but I will tell you, the high school probably has a lot more work to do in terms of the number of supports and services at the tiers versus the other buildings that have had a kind of head start at it.
One final question. I know you won't have a question too. Just for clarity, you mentioned a form. So are we talking about, so a child starts, we're going to start from the beginning, starts at Waverly. Is every child going to have their form that will carry through with them through the life cycle of their Eastchester career here?
Yeah, so the important part of that is not only are there forms on how we create a plan, take data on a plan from year to year, it'll be consistent. That kid, hopefully they won't, but they may have multiple of those forms. They may have one for kindergarten, one for...
Right.
The other thing is we have consistent forms of how we communicate with parents about what's happening in the tiers. And in the draft document, we outlay that too. So yes.
But it's consistent from one building to the other.
The form is the same K through 12 in the district.
We're just adding to it.
Right. What the research has shown at a good MTSS system, if you do the framework consistently across your organization, vertically and horizontally, you increase communication. You're able to communicate with providers, administrators, parents in a consistent way. And that has shown in meta-analysis to actually promote better student outcomes and better school outcomes in general. So that's why we want to keep some consistency on how we operate. So if I'm an interventionist at Waverly, my process, my forms are the same if I'm an interventionist at the high school.
It's awesome. Thank you.
I wanted to, maybe my comment is more of a comment or a charge than a question, which is, and it goes back to even, I was on the PTA council when we started the Health and Wellness Committee to talk about the increase, even pre-COVID, of anxiety with students and the need for social emotional learning and supports. I want to make sure that you guys are all, and we've kind of talked about this, that you guys are all careful to recognize that you touched on it a little bit, right? For AIS, when the grades are being impacted, it becomes pretty clear, oh, there's a problem. But in many cases, the anxiety issues are with the kids who are actually, really doing well with their grades, and perhaps some of the anxiety is that they are trying so hard to be successful with their grades. So I would just say, I think it's important, and not that we don't want kids to be successful with their grades, but not at the expense of their social health and wellness. So I wanted to make sure that you guys, in your areas of focus, weren't just leaving it to a grade impact, but we're actually kind of looking at the whole picture, the holistic view of the child, together with the teaching staff and together with the staff, to make sure that we weren't having situations that were being missed for kids who needed support because their grades were good.
Yeah, thank you for that point, and that's why an MTSS system has equal weight to social emotional well-being as it does to academic. And we know the research says if both things are good, student performance goes out. If one is down and one is up, student performance is not as good. And I thought, Dana talked really well about we're starting to look at those ways holistically.
And I applaud that, and I appreciate that. So I just wanted to make sure that was not missed by people.
I just have a quick question on, you mentioned the multi-year process. How, and this looks great, by the way, I commend you guys for the work you've done, but have you started that process to outline your annual MTS process of how you're going to meet, what you're planning to do so you don't lose any of the momentum that you've had this year, going into next year, so it's not a start-stop type of an approach?
Yeah, we talked about that as a committee, and if the board adopts this as our district MTSS plan at the next, our format worked really well. We'll ask people to return. We'll ask more people to join. We really want some more representation from schools. We'll meet again 4 times of the year. We will have work. When we meet, it's not just we meet and talk. We have a formalized structure where we have certain goals we want to meet at the meeting. Our areas of focus will be our goals, and we will come up with a plan for the year on our first meeting on how we're going to tackle and address some of those areas of focus, update the plan if they have budget impacts, put that part of the budgetary process. And certainly we would love to come back to this board if invited. I'm going on too long, so you may not invite me, but we would love to come back and give you updates of where we are. But it's an iterative process that we see a long-term commitment to. Thank you very much, and I want to thank Susan and Dana and Kristen for joining me this evening, and I thank the members of the committee.
Okay, thank you, Greg. And the board will have on May 16th a resolution approving the MTSS committee. So on that note, unless there are other comments, I've concluded my report. We can proceed with the remainder of the meeting. Good. Thank you.
All right. Am I on? We are up to approval of the consent agenda, I believe, right? What do we have to do for that? Public budget hearing, do we have to do something for that? No, Lori says no. Okay. All right. Who would like to do the consent agenda? Anyone? Christine, thank you.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the consent agenda, which includes the following: 8, approval of minutes; 9, personnel agenda; 10, Committee on Preschool Special Education recommendations; 11, pupil personnel recommendations; 12, educational and curriculum and instruction; 13, business office recommendations; 14, other business with the exception of 14.1.
All right. Do we have a second? Okay, Matt, all in, yes?
Could we remove 14.2, 14.3 for separate vote?
Okay.
Yeah, that's common.
Yeah.
Well, he wants to vote separately on 14.2 and 14.3.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. All right. So we'll remove those. All right.
There'll be a roll call.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So all in favor? Okay. So we are up to 14.1.
Do we want to, I think 14.2 and 3 are going to be simple. Vito just every year likes to make sure that he's not voting on the budget of the other. Well, yeah, so we can do that quickly, right?
Okay.
I'll move 14.1 and 2.
No, 2
I'm
and
sorry,
3.
2 and
2 and
3.
3.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. I'm sorry, Chrissy, I just did
No,
your
no,
job.
that's okay. So do you want to discuss?
Discussion. I just want
Okay.
to say that I'm going to abstain from those because we have very little input into the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association, and I just don't feel comfortable voting to affirm anything on those two matters, so I'm going to abstain. That's all.
All right. Anyone else? Discussion? No? Okay. So, all in favor? Not you? Okay.
One abstain.
All right. And that was for both 2 and 3, right?
Yeah.
14.2 and 3. Okay, so now we'll go to 14.1, which is the resolution. Okay. I could do that, I guess, right? Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the resolution for diversity, equity, and inclusion as stated below. Vito, I think you wanted to discuss this.
Yeah, I asked for this to be removed from the consent agenda because unfortunately I wasn't here this last week, but that's okay. And I think we should discuss the wording. I think the wording can be tightened a little bit, can be said a little bit better. It's not that I'm against the resolution because I'm for the resolution. It's that I think that we could word it a little more efficiently. And I'd like to read something, and I'm only throwing this out not to be voted on, but to be wordsmithed further, okay? So if you read the resolution the way it's written, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, whereas the Board of Education reviewed and approved these recommendations, now be it resolved, I'd like to consider changing that paragraph there to read, now be it resolved that the Board of Ed adopts the following overarching goals effective immediately. Okay? And then I want to make a couple of changes to the wording and the goals too, but the reason I'm suggesting that is because
Yeah, I'm sorry, before you go on, can you, what are you rewriting? You're rewriting,
this sentence.
the way
right
it
here.
reads right now, I'm sorry, is now be it resolved that the following goals will be implemented for the
That one
23-24
sentence.
school year, effective
I'm-
May 2nd.
I'm suggesting that we reword it slightly. That one sentence.
To read to me again what you said?
I'll read it again.
Okay.
And like I say, this is for
Yeah.
wordsmithing. Everybody
Right.
pick a better word.
It's just hard when we don't have it printed out,
I
at least for me.
understand. Now be it resolved that the Board of Education adopts the following overarching goals, okay, effective immediately.
Well, May 2nd is immediately.
No, but
Yeah.
it talks about
And
for
you're
next
saying-
year and stuff like that.
And you're saying
Just-
overarching just instead of
By
just
overall, I'm
goals?
saying that these should be like, the district has goals already, okay? And these goals should be like way on top of our goals that we should consider. They're overarching goals. Anybody have a better word, please throw it in there, because I'm not, I'm not the linguist. you know. So I'm just.
You may not need the adjective.
You may not. You may not. You're right, okay? These goals. But if you say these goals, you're implying that
That's what
there
it says.
aren't other
That's what it
goals.
says. It
And
says
we
these
do
goals,
have
though,
other
right?
goals. So I'm just, I think that sentence could be said a little better that way. And then in the 1, 2, 3, and 4, I have some other little tweaks that I think would be a little bit better.
So the thing about 1, 2, 3, and 4 is that those are the actual goals.
Those were the recommendations made by the committee, but now we're establishing goals, so we could reword them slightly. And I'll give you a for instance. It says, create a welcoming and affirming environment. I think we kind of do that now. I think we need a better verb than create. I don't know what that verb is, okay? I throw that out there. Maybe it's affirm, welcoming, or we already have an affirming environment, but something like, I'm just saying there's a better way to say it. If we're gonna state these as our, 5,000 foot.
Maintain.
Cultivate.
What's that?
Cultivate's a good word.
That's what I'm
Cultivate.
trying to get to. I'm trying to get pull some stuff in. I think we could just word
Did
it a
you bring
little
your
better.
thesaurus?
Yeah, it's,
Yes.
Okay,
Cultivate,
I'm
I
not sure
like
if I'm using the right wording, but these were just the 4 pillars, if you will, the exact wording that came down from the state in that document.
But they weren't written as goals.
Well, maybe we change the word goals and say something along the lines of, whereas the Board of Education has reviewed and approved these recommendations referring to the January 11th, right? That's what we're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Something like, now be it resolved that those recommendations be implemented in accordance with these 4 I don't think we should change the wording of this,
No.
because that's the wording in the document.
Yeah.
But then you can't say goals.
Right, we can change
you
the
gotta
word
change
goals,
goals.
maybe, but maybe tie it to that the recommendations that were presented on January 11th that the board approved, that those are under these.
Well, we did approve those recommendations already.
But this is just to officially approve them,
I
because we
get that.
didn't have
I
a
get that.
formal vote on it.
Then why don't we say that? Why don't we say that we hereby officially approve those recommendations made on that date and then not change anything? Because that's all you're doing. You're not setting goals for next year.
Okay, so
You know what I'm saying? That's the issue I had, because the way it was written, we were establishing these goals going forward, but if we're only officially approving what we've already discussed and already accepted, I'm okay with that.
So what do you want
Jackie,
it
what
to
does it say
say?
on the header on the slide? I'm sorry. Like, what you just read off of, like, what does it say those 4 things are if they're not goals?
Principles, principals. Principal number
principals.
one.
Okay,
You know,
okay,
What
so
if we call them principles instead of
let's
goals in
use
the
them-
language?
principles instead of goals.
you know, do we accept that, you know, we?
Officially,
Officially, yeah, that's
officially
fine. that's fine.
accept
My
the
point
following
was that they
principles.
For
were
the following
goals.
principles.
No, now be resolved that the following principles will be implemented
Implemented.
effective May, and you can drop it for this 2024 school year, effective May 2nd, 2023.
So just
Yep.
change goals to principles.
Yep.
And drop the timeline of the implementation, will be implemented effective.
Yeah.
Effective immediately.
Okay.
Effective immediately.
Effective May 2nd, I mean,
Or
I
whatever.
think you need a date, right?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
and I mean, creating doesn't necessarily imply that it doesn't already exist. It
Yeah,
just implies.
And quite
we're gonna
honestly,
make sure
like
we're-
the four things, and Doc, you help me on this one. Create, fostering, identifying, and engaging. It should be create, foster, identify, and engage.
Yeah, you want to be consistent as to. a
You want to
verb.
be consistent, right? Or
But these are
creating
from the state.
and then
I'm
fostering,
just
and,
double
you
checking.
know, so.
And if
But-
you don't like
Fostering.
create, you can say sustain.
Well, actually,
But those are from the state.
well, actually, let's see. So this one, unless this is misprinted, I don't know, creating, create.
Chrissy, state's not always right.
So
Okay.
So,
we're eliminating three gerunds for a verb.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if that's the part to really perseverate on, but yeah, sure,
No,
we
it's
can
not.
keep it
I was just
consistent.
pointing out the inconsistency there,
Right.
that's all.
No, I can see from here, and you pointed it out, right? It says creating on there also,
Yeah.
so just fix the typo of create to
Well,
creating.
Oh,
Creating.
okay,
The idea is to
that's
be
the case.
consistent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
that
creating.
works.
So we're changing goals to principles. We're changing.
Taking out
May
23,
2nd
24 to effective.
To effective
May
immediately.
2nd.
And we're
Effective
and
Or effective make.
And
2023, okay, so effective immediately, and then we're changing.
Create
have
to
all this?
creating.
Huh? No, we'll just,
I'm gonna put in the notations, I'm gonna put the language.
okay.
So then we'll be
Just gonna put in the language, so we could just
I think
vote.
everybody can see the language in my notation, I'm not sure, but I was told
Where are
that's
you
how.
putting
it
that?
Are you doing it right now,
The little,
Judith?
the little
All of the
check
other
box.
ones
little-
are
oh, up on
verbatim.
the top,
The
right?
following pillars.
creating.
So I have now be resolved that the following pillars will be implemented.
Principles, right?
I
Principles.
think,
Oh,
Judy, you have to
principles,
type
sorry.
it and then hit the
Correct,
check to
principles.
share it.
LAS.
Okay, yeah, principles, sorry.
Okay. Good,
Will
that,
be
that, you know, that
implemented.
works.
effective
And then creating instead
May-
of create.
And are you sticking with an active verb or? a
Yeah, we'll
gerund?
change creative to
No, we're going to
creating.
the gerunds now.
We're going to
Take
creating.
out the gerunds.
The original one apparently was.
Creating.
Jude, I think
Right.
when you're done with that, you have to hit the check for us to
Yep,
see
I
it,
had,
right?
yeah, now you
Okay.
should see it. Do you guys all see it, little annotation in the box?
I have to
Yep,
refresh
so
maybe?
refresh it.
Like
Yeah.
the three dots? Yeah.
Okay.
Did it come up?
No, I lost the whole thing.
Oh.
Back here.
All right, are we good now?
Hold on,
I think we are.
no, what the heck is this?
I had it.
All right, I'm secretary, I'm taking the notes, I got it covered.
Okay.
Okay.
We believe Judah.
Now could we vote?
Okay, no, hold on.
Oh.
Now, the second piece down in the bottom now, I'm gonna ask a question about, why are we doing 5 building levels teams? Why can't we have Hutch and Greenvale work together? I don't think we should be having those two schools work independently. They might come up with different scenarios, they might come up with different stuff. I think if they work together, I think it's better worked at a grade level than it is at a building level. So you have Waverly's a grade level, middle school's a grade level, high school's a grade level. I think we should have 2 through 5 as a grade level. So I'd rather see 4 teams than 5. Okay, what do people think about that?
I think that's a great idea, but my first thought is that there's slightly different student populations at Ann Hutch and Greenville, which might motivate the committee to go in, a more specific direction.
You're absolutely right, and that's the reason why they should be together. Because those kids, while separated for 4 years, I'm gonna go back to Doc, they'll be coming back together again, and they might have different needs right now, but what we're doing in Hutch and we're doing in Greenville, and maybe Greenville has a vision of something that needs to be done that should also be doing in Hutch, but they don't have that vision. So if the teams meet together, okay, we will get that vision for 2 through 5.
I think that 2 things. I think there should be 5 separate committees, because they're different schools, although with Greenvale and Ann Hutch, there needs to be synergies there. But I think as a subsequent to the 5 committee, I think there should be some stipulation that speaks to Greenvale and Ann Hutch coming together to review their
Yeah.
Meeting together would be a great way to
but I
do
think they
it.
should be,
They could still be separate,
Creative
Ann Hutch and
and
Greenvale, but they
come
could still
together.
have meetings together,
So
so that they make
we
sure
have to
that
set that
they're.
up is
you don't think that's a
What
part
if
of the
we
essence
just
of
leave it as building
They
level committees without putting a number, and
sorry?
then, what if we just leave it as building level committees without putting a number, and then let the administration determine the best
That's
way to move
okay.
forward?
Let the committee figure out, and
Take
I
out the
think,
word 5.
I mean,
Yeah.
we've been this whole year in the spirit of the schools, Greenvale and Ann Hutch coming
Yeah,
together.
because the whole
So-
thing is about,
Yeah.
we try to do this with curriculum, we try to do this with everything, to make sure everything's together, and why should we be doing this separately? You know?
Understood, but I still think there should be 5.
No,
Well,
But I know what you're saying,
that's-
but they need to come, yeah.
4 or 5 is immaterial. The
Right.
fact is that those two, if there are 2 separate ones, they have to work together. They shouldn't be working independently.
Well, I think they have to identify the needs for each building, but they should streamline and harmonize
If
the
they're on-
good from each,
Yeah.
from
Yes.
each building level
Kind of
committee.
the
So
best
you don't
of-
have
right.
an inequity between the buildings if there's actually a better process there. But
And
there
I
could
will,
be
I will
differences.
just say that Susan Chester is going to be the district-wide coordinator, so I'm sure that Susan will make sure that each of the
Susan knows what's
building
going on.
levels are doing the
Excuse me,
same
excuse
thing
me,
together.
Dr. Chester.
Dr. Chester,
With Madeline.
with Madeline, yes, but I think Susan is going to be on every single committee, am I
She,
correct?
She has offered to go to each committee.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Chester.
So I'm
The
sure Dr.
traveling
Chester
Dr. Chester.
will make
Okay.
sure that all 5 are on the same.
So we're all
So do we
pulled
want
in.
to pull the word 5 out of it and just leave it up to?
Building
Delete
level.
5.
Delete 5, all right, so we're removing 5. All right, I think I got all the notes.
I'm sorry, can I just pause on that for a second? Does that just leave that too ambiguous if we're not saying 5, that it indicates each individual school? And just saying,
I also think you can't
I
have
like
a
to say-
30-person committee.
I like
either,
to say
right?
5.
You wanna leave it
I
5?
would say leave 5 in. I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
Knowing that Dr. Chester, you've heard it loud and clear tonight.
Wait, who? Say it again?
Dr. Chester. No, I think I'm going to trust in the fact that our administration is going to make sure that there's going to be,
They'll be aligned.
that coming, yeah. And I'm sure there's going to be reporting
Well-
that we're going to get.
There's still going to be a district-wide
have-
committee that everyone is going to
We
be
had the
reporting back
discussion,
to.
and we
What-
made our
what-
feelings known.
Right.
And
Right.
if it stays as 5, that's 5, it's not a problem.
Whether you state 5 or not,
not.
there are 5
Yeah.
schools that constitute the Eastchester School District. Yeah.
I think administration building should be represented too.
Well, we are. There is a district-wide committee,
I know.
yes.
Okay, so we're good.
We're
All
good?
right, so
Yeah.
we're not getting rid of 5. So all we did is, so do you want me to read the new language?
Just that one sentence is the only thing.
If you
that
could
changed,
read
really.
the whole thing for everybody, Judah, I think that'd be great.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
All right, and and I put it into its own Google document in case the notation thing didn't work. I'll share with everyone shortly. All right, whereas the Board of Education is committed to creating and maintaining a positive and inclusive learning environment where all students feel safe, included, welcomed, accepted, and experience a sense of belonging and academic success. And whereas the district-wide Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force made recommendations to the Board of Education on January 11, 2022, and whereas the Board of Education has reviewed and approved these recommendations, now be it resolved that the following principles will be implemented effective May 2nd, 2023. 1, creating a welcoming and affirming environment. 2, fostering high expectations and rigorous instruction. Emphasis on the changes, right? 3, identifying inclusive curriculum and assessment. 4, engaging in ongoing professional learning and support. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education authorizes 5 building-level DEI committees effective July 1st, 2023, with each consisting of the following positions, and the rest is the same. We all good with that? So technically, you made the motion, we didn't have someone second the motion.
I made
So-
the motion.
Oh, you made the motion? No, all right, whatever.
Yeah, I
We
made
need
the
someone
motion
to
open the
second.
discussion.
No, the motion
I made the
to.
motion and you
accept?
seconded,
Chrissy made the
yeah.
initial motion.
I got you.
Someone needs to second the motion.
I'll second the motion.
All right, and then I'm going to move the amended language, And then
And I'll
some,
second
and Vito will second
Second
the
it.
amended
Okay.
language. I think we've covered Robert's rules.
Yes.
I'll leave it to our Robert's rules expert, and now we are open
Now
to
we're-
discussion, right? And if there's any further discussion,
Any further discussion, and then we can vote.
Yeah.
We vote?
and a vote.
Vote. Okay, so all in favor? All right.
Excellent. All right.
The motion carries unanimously.
Yes. After prudent discussion.
Summary.
Yes.
Sorry, I can't help my, procedural, whatever, process.
And fixing the wording.
Yeah.
Okay, so, future meeting dates, May 16th, which is our budget vote and trustee election, then 2 more meetings for the year, June 6th and June 20th. So we are up to comments from the public. If there are any comments from the public, if you could please sign in and state your name and address.
Sure. Hello, my name's Sean Bolduc, 14 Myrtle. I'm I'm here because I want to thank everybody for all the volunteering that they're doing. I think it's great to see the kind of town that we have. But I have some concerns with the budget that I just want to go into. I came in here ready to rip roar about the numbers and go through a bunch of stuff. I was very happy to hear the breakdown to show that we actually have some availability in budgeting, and we're being smart to that. But there's a few things that caught me off guard. So we have a bump of $3.6 million, and I just want clarification if that $3.6 million goes away, or if we stay at that higher number, because last year we were at $12 million, and I think we go down. If you want to answer it?
Yeah, you finished? Yeah, sure.
No, well, I'll
Yeah,
finish
according
that
to current law, we keep that 3.6. It stays at 16, and then the legislature could add to it going forward.
Thank you.
But that was part of the settlement that they all agreed to restoring that foundation aid.
Great, that's awesome. We doubled our security, which is great. I think that's going to make a lot of parents very happy. That doubling ends up being about $780,000. To be clear with you, I believe you're reducing the teacher count for the K through 5th grade by 3 teachers for next year. Is that confirmed?
Well, right now, there are 3 net reductions in classroom positions. However, there are increases in the elementary level. We added 2 FLES positions at the Waverly School for the new program in foreign language, elementary Spanish. We also added a position for a literacy coach district-wide. That was a net addition beyond that. And we've added some other positions throughout the elementary area, and some in part, some in whole.
But the net reduction of classes is
It
3.
right now is
So you've
3.
actually reduced the number of classes by 3 while increasing security. So we've
Correct.
swapped teachers for security officers.
No, no,
That's a clear, hold on, just let
It
me
wasn't a
speak.
one-for-one.
Seems pretty close, but that is a perception a lot of people are taking. Now, you talked about the student-to-teacher ratios. The student-to-teacher ratios right now, you showed are north of 20 to 1, and actually they're going up because the 4th graders, our ratio currently, which would be 5th graders now, have gone up. And they're going up to 24 to 1. Now, the adjacent schools, Bronxville is 14 to 1, Scarsdale is 13 to 1, national average is 17 to 1, and Yonkers is 18 to 1 in terms of student-to-teacher ratio. So
what is Eastchester according to your numbers?
based on your numbers, you were 20.
No.
Hold on.
My numbers are elementary only, sir.
I understand that.
You included
That's-
secondary in those other districts.
I understand that, but look at Bronxville. They're below us. They're at 24.
Yes, when you compare apples and oranges,
Their
they are
classes,
different.
their elementary school classes are 24 to 1.
Where did you get your information from? Because I don't,
It's online. You can go to the state board and look it up.
Right. No, all of that information is online. I'm simply pointing out that the only numbers I showed you tonight were elementary numbers for next year.
Correct.
I did not include middle school nor high school numbers, nor any special ed ratios.
Correct.
When you do a total ratio analysis of a district, that number drops to the teens and sometimes lower. We could bring to the next meeting what that looks like in the Eastchester School District from a K-12 perspective and compare it
But
to
you
other
made a statement,
districts.
you made a statement that you would add classes potentially to fifth grade. You're actually reducing the number of classes in fifth grade, correct?
No,
Currently right
what-
now, the fourth grade has 5 classes. Next year they will have 4 classes in those grade, when they become fifth graders.
For the
They-
98 students,
they'll
we
be
have
reduced.
projected 4 sections, correct?
What is it right now? What is the class count right now?
Well, I
For the fourth
suspect
graders?
you already stated it, it's 5.
It's 5. So we're reducing the number of classes. I just want to make that clear, because you made a statement today that you potentially could add a teacher, but you're reducing the number of teachers.
Right, and let's not conflate 2 different things.
Sure.
I said publicly, we've reduced 3 positions at the elementary level, correct?
3 teachers in classes,
3 positions,
in class count.
yeah.
Okay.
I also stated tonight that if, in monitoring enrollment, it is necessary for us to take a second look at that and readjust that number, then we will do so.
How do we as the town help to work to converse that statement? Because there's a lot of parents right now that would like to see that ratio stay where it's currently at.
Yeah, I know, I've received emails from the Ann Hutch parents.
Dr. Valenti, if I could
yes.
just, I'm sorry, if I could just interject briefly. It sounds like some of these are very specific questions. I just want to be cognizant of time for everyone that
That's
are
right,
very in the
it was
nitty gritty.
3 minutes.
Perhaps we should schedule a meeting with perhaps Lee, Mr. Bolduc, and
Yes.
yourself to kind of go through the questions.
Be happy to
If
meet
you
with
have
you.
specific questions, you can schedule
that'd be a good
meeting
idea.
with Dr. Valenti.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I offered your wife that
She
opportunity,
did.
too.
She's watching the kids, and I came here instead.
That's
because
quite
she
all
was-
right.
she was
No, I'd be
running
happy to
around-
speak
running
with
around doing
her,
stuff.
you, both
So
of you.
We
But-
appreciated the offer.
Right.
That's why I made sure to be here.
Yeah.
But it's not just me. There's a lot of people seeing the numbers going down, or the teacher count, class count going down. And that is a surprise, considering you added a class to the last year, the fourth grade Ann Hutch got an additional class. We went to 5 classes from 4. The student count didn't change. This year, or the upcoming year, it's going down.
Okay.
The class count is going down, which is a surprise. That's all. I don't know if others are aware of that, but they added a class, and now they're reducing it for the same student
Yeah,
count.
I'd be
Thank you.
happy to meet with you privately, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Bianca Zimmerman. I'm 58 Joyce. I think a lot of us, while it's great that you're going to meet with Sean, I'm here with almost the exact same concern as Sean.
Right, I responded to your
you did.
email today, too, did I
And-
not?
You did. And I understand that it's going to be considered, but right now, if nothing changes, you are telling us there's going to be more kids in our kids' classes next year than there are right now. And so all of us fourth grade parents at Ann Hutch, I think we need to have a broader meeting than just maybe like just Sean and you and to kind of bring this up with all of the Ann Hutch parents, because I think I didn't realize until now that this was going to be affecting, our actual kids and what exactly that meant, and, is it 3 positions people are just shifting around, or now we're actually having more kids in classes. And while it's great that I guess our student-teacher ratios compare to other classes, we're talking about 25, maybe 26, who knows, 5th graders. These are the kids who, they were in 1st grade during COVID. They have not really gotten a great shake here. And the class beneath them, they were the Waverly kids during COVID. And now we're going to go and, put them, even more of them in class, and then, send them off to middle school. And it's great, all the social emotional things that we're talking about, but like right here, right now, I think we're doing a disservice to the 4th grade class and to any other class that we're talking about making them have bigger classes next year. Like, that doesn't feel equal to anyone. So I think we need a bigger meeting to talk about it and what we can do as parents to kind of help this out, because I don't think any of us are really excited that our kids are going to be in bigger classes.
Especially if we can afford it and not increase the taxes at all. You said there's additional funding available. You could do that, not change the tax like at all. You could keep it at 0
If I could just say that, I don't know if you were here for the beginning of the meeting, but we did discuss that classes can go up to 1 to 27. And we have all had, I know some of us have had kids in classes 1 to 27. So going from 1 to 24 is not unusual. It is very much in the average. And this is something that gets done every year. Like every year, they switch from 9 sections to 10 sections.
No, I mean, I understand, and during their second grade year, some of them went back to 1 to 29. Like, we're not talking about that we've never seen these kind of great numbers to teachers. But, you know, these kids are probably kids who could use a little bit more time because they still are feeling those COVID disruptions. This was the first year that felt normal for them since they were in kindergarten, at least from my perspective. And I get that they can go up to 27, but that's horrible for elementary school kids. Like, we're paying such high taxes. Like, I mean, that's why people are moving here, for the community and for the schools.
Striving to meet the middle. Striving to meet the minimum.
That is the middle.
Well, I think,
Anyone?
The only other comment I'll make is that I recall, and I'm going to bring up a bad memory for all of us, right? I recall when we were presenting about the changing of the districts to put schools together, one of the comments that was made from the public was, you know, there were kids in numerous elementary schools with classes that were higher than 25, 26, 28, and what I saw today is 22 on average. And I realized that at 4th and 5th grade there were exceptions, but I still feel like we're doing better than we were, notwithstanding your comparison with other districts. By the same token, I hear you. I obviously, you know, the goal is always to have the best possible, you know, classroom environment with the least number of students possible. You know, I would charge with the notion that if we can look at a way to make that work in the 5th grade, that'd be great. But we also don't want to be, you know, what do we do about the other classes that are at the same class size,
Exactly.
right? We have other classes that are at 24 to 1 or 23 to 1. You know, if we change that out, it doesn't seem like it's, you know, every class that's affected is going to say, what about my kid? We have to do our best for the population in general. So that's the only comment I would make.
So that's a great point. And if you raise the taxes by 1%, I think you could fund 7 extra teachers, 6 extra teachers, plus or minus. So $1.6 million. We have enough funding to not to have zero. I think you bring up a great point. I mean, Dr. Valenti made a point that we need to compete with our Bronxvilles, our Scarsdales, and everyone else. We could do that without raising taxes right now. We could do that with putting a 1% tax, which again ends up being $11.50 a month per household. We could really we could change all of that, and we're not. I just think that's a missed opportunity. That's all. But I think you great pointed out.
yeah, I want to make one last statement, if I may. There is no relationship between the 0% that we're proposing and the staffing situation.
That's what's maddening.
There is no correlation. It's zero.
That's what's maddening because what you're saying is you're choosing not to replace those teachers.
Well, I don't want to relitigate it. I'm simply saying that to make a connection between the two is a fallacy. Okay? Suggesting a 1% tax rate increase to buy 7 teachers is not what this conversation's about.
Sure.
It's about an appropriate teacher-student ratio for each grade level. Greenvale has one class at 1 to 24.
I agree with you. It's the same situation. Greenville lost a teacher, and that balance had to kick out that way.
Well,
I think that's a shame.
again, we could have this discussion privately. I know we've exceeded the time, sir. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other comments? You?
Well, when we get to the board.
Yeah, no, I think we're done with public comments. So we have board comments.
I just want to remind everyone out there that this coming Sunday, we're going to have the Dom Cesare Baseball Tournament, which is rescheduled from last weekend. And hopefully it won't rain this time. But we will be doing the dedication and renaming of the street I think around 2:30, somewhere around there, but, time TBD, but keep it on your schedules. And there'll be 3 baseball games that day, all coached by coaches that were taught by Coach Cesari. So, everybody's invited. Come and show the flag.
All right, anyone else? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Christy, and a second, Jackie. All right, all in favor? Okay, good night, everyone.
Thank you.